The Nazi regime under Adolf Hitler conducted numerous horrifying and unethical experiments on human subjects during World War II. These experiments were conducted by various doctors and scientists, often in concentration camps, and resulted in immense suffering and loss of life. While it's difficult to rank the worst experiments, here are 10 examples of particularly notorious and horrific Nazi experiments. Auschwitz Twins Experiments. Dr. Joseph Mengele, also known as the Angel of Death, conducted cruel experiments on twins at Auschwitz concentration camp. Twins, mostly children, were selected for these experiments and subjected to a range of procedures, including organ removal without anesthesia, injections of harmful substances, and forced pregnancies. Mengele sought to study hereditary traits and find ways to increase Aryan birth rates. Freezing experiments. In an effort to understand hypothermia and develop treatments for German soldiers in cold environments, prisoners were exposed to extreme cold temperatures. They were submerged in icy water or left outdoors in freezing conditions for extended periods. The subjects suffered from severe frostbite, gangrene, and organ failure. Some were rewarmed in hot water baths to study the effects of rapid temperature changes. High-altitude experiments. These experiments aim to simulate the conditions faced by pilots flying at high altitudes. Prisoners were placed in low-pressure chambers, causing excruciating pain, difficulty breathing, and swelling of the body. Many experienced seizures, loss of consciousness, and some died due to the extreme conditions. These experiments were intended to develop methods for aircraft ejection and rescue. Sulfa drug experiments. Nazi doctors tested the effectiveness of sulfa drugs on infected wounds and burns. They deliberately inflicted wounds on prisoners and infected them with bacteria. The subjects suffered from severe infections, gangrene, and other complications, often leading to death. These experiments were conducted to develop treatments for German soldiers on the battlefield. Seawater experiments. Prisoners were forced to drink seawater to test its usability as an emergency fluid replacement for German sailors. The high salt content of seawater caused severe dehydration, electrolyte imbalances, kidney damage, and agonizing deaths. These experiments were conducted to aid in the development of emergency supplies for sailors stranded at sea. Bone and muscle transplantation. In an attempt to explore methods for regenerating bones and muscles, prisoners had their limbs amputated and transplanted onto others. These procedures often resulted in infection, gangrene, and death for both the donor and the recipient. The experiments aimed to develop techniques for treating wounded soldiers and civilians. Mustard gas experiments. Prisoners were exposed to mustard gas and other poisonous substances to study their effects and develop effective gas masks and treatments for chemical warfare injuries. The subjects suffered from severe burns, organ damage, blistering, and long-term health issues. Many experienced excruciating pain and irreversible harm as a result of these experiments. Sterilization experiments. Nazi doctors forcibly sterilized prisoners, both male and female, as part of the Nazis' eugenic ideology. Various methods were employed, including X-ray radiation, chemicals, and surgery. These procedures caused immense physical and psychological trauma to the victims, depriving them of their reproductive capabilities and violating their basic human rights. Malaria experiments. Prisoners were deliberately infected with malaria to test experimental drugs and vaccines. The subjects experienced high fevers, chills, organ failure, and extreme weakness. Many died as a result of the infection and the lack of effective treatments. These experiments were conducted to aid the German military in combating malaria among their troops. Poison experiments. Prisoners were administered lethal doses of poisons such as cyanide to test antidotes and protective measures. These experiments caused excruciating deaths, including convulsions and respiratory distress. The purpose was to develop protective measures and treatments for German soldiers exposed to chemical agents. It is important to remember that these experiments were conducted without the consent of the victims, who were subjected to unimaginable suffering, pain, and death. The cruelty and disregard for human life demonstrated during these experiments epitomize the depths of Nazi atrocities. Thanks for watching, and please like and subscribe. Thank you.